Welcome, everyone, to the Information's TITV. My name is Akash Masricha. It is Monday, June 1st. We have breaking news to start the show today. Anthropic today filed confidentially for an IPO. It was just last week that the company closed its latest private funding round at a $900 billion valuation before the investment. And that figure is bigger than OpenAI based on its latest funding round. Now, there have been a number of reports that OpenAI has been looking to expedite its IPO filing process, so we'll be closely watching to see if and when we see OpenAI's filing. We're going to have more coverage for this to come, so stay tuned. Today on the show, we will unpack Nvidia's latest PC-focused chip that it unveiled alongside Microsoft. We'll also preview Microsoft's Build conference, which is kicking off this week. We're then going to unpack our profile of Denise Dresser, OpenAI's new Chief Revenue Officer, who was previously the CEO of Slack at Salesforce. We'll also talk about forward-deployed engineering and the boom across that category of roles across the AI ecosystem. And to close out the show, we've got Meta's former CTO, Mike Schroepfer, coming on the show to talk about his fund, Gigascale Capital's big new $250 million in fundraising. It's going to be a fun show, so let's get right on into it. Microsoft and Nvidia unveiled a new chip for PCs, putting Nvidia squarely in the game of personal computing. I want to bring on our Microsoft reporter, Aaron Holmes, to break down that announcement. Aaron, welcome back to the show. It's great to have you here.
Happy to be here.
Okay, so what did Microsoft and Nvidia unveil today?
So this biggest part of this news is NVIDIA's new chip called the N1X. And specifically, NVIDIA has for a while dominated the market for chips in data centers. But with this chip, they're actually, releasing their first core processor for PCs. So they are now entering into the PC market, which has, for a long time been dominated by Intel and Qualcomm and some other competitors. And on top of that, we saw Microsoft as well as some other, PC makers preview new machines that will use this chip. So in Microsoft's case, that is the newest version of their Surface laptop. They haven't really said many details, including, what it'll actually cost. But the idea is that this laptop will have in a lot of ways higher performance and be able to run more AI features locally than previous versions of the Surface.
And to what extent did NVIDIA have PC chips before this? Because I know NVIDIA had certainly made its name in gaming, and I know, there are tons of PCs out there that are good for gaming. So was it already in this market?
So NVIDIA had mostly been making graphics processing units, which are, essentially what handle graphics on PCs as well as, GPUs in data centers. They hadn't done as much central processing units, which is, the core processors for what your PC runs on. So this is definitely an expansion for them. And, we also have seen that CPUs are in short supply right now. So I think that they are well positioned to capitalize on, that supply crunch.
So to what extent do you think then NVIDIA could actually then pose a threat in the CPU market to the other CPU giants? I'm thinking about ARM, I'm thinking about Intel, the companies that, Microsoft and the likes of them have traditionally relied on for these chips. Is it just a scenario where there's such a shortage right now that any supply is good?
Well, what's interesting is that this chip is going to sit inside of NVIDIA's what it's called RTX Spark, which essentially combines the standard computer processor as well as a GPU and a memory in one system. And I think the idea there is that if NVIDIA can offer all of that for essentially what is a more a cheaper or more bang for your buck, then that might be appealing to PC makers, but also to the end customers. Again, we don't really know how much this is actually going to cost, so it's hard to say how appealing that will be, and whether this is going to be something that any PC buyer would want versus someone who wants extremely high performance. But either way, it definitely seems like an opportunity for NVIDIA to seize on that market a bit.
And what about for Microsoft? What do you think this means for Microsoft's business and its PC line?
Microsoft has been trying for a long time to get their Surface devices to stand out from the competition, and we've seen Surface undergo, a number of overhauls in recent years. They, for a while, were marketing Copilot plus PCs, which were essentially, PCs that were designed to run more AI locally using Snapdragon processors. It's not clear if that really caught off with consumers. But I think that, with this NVIDIA partnership, they have essentially a new angle to promote the Surface. And, in a lot of ways, I think they're trying to encroach more on the MacBook market, especially for, developers who want to be able to use their personal device to develop and run more advanced applications. So whether that pays off, we have to wait and see.
Can I just ask you a quick question here? You said Snapdragon processor. What is a Snapdragon processor?
That's just a previous brand
Okay.
of
Okay.
processor that they
Well, I
used.
guess, I mean, the names, as we know, in this category are sometimes very creative. So it's better than 5.4, 4.7, whatever the other naming convention is. I'll tell you that much. Um, okay, I want to talk about a story that you published today, Anthropic. You went deep on how companies are using Anthropic's Mythos model. And just to refresh folks, I mean, this was the killer model that came out. Everyone was scared because its capabilities were so strong. Anthropic said, we're only going to give access to a couple of companies here to use the model. You went out into the world of cybersecurity. You talked to some of the companies using it. What did you find?
Yeah, so essentially, we already knew that Mythos was going to be more expensive than Anthropic's earlier models, which were already on the pricier end of AI models. But I spoke to people who were testing it and got a sense of what that actually means in practice. And I learned, a lot of testers saw that they ran through $1 million worth of tokens testing the model in just a couple of weeks. Palo Alto Networks has been using it to test their internal source code. And within 3 weeks, they had used over $1 million worth of tokens. But what's also interesting is
And
that
and that's just to put this in context. That's a lot, right? Like, because these are companies, hundreds of billions of dollar companies. This is still a lot, right? Based on what they usually spend.
yeah, for just a couple of weeks of usage, that is, pretty expensive. And what's interesting is that companies still are planning to budget for this just because the, amount that they're spending, they think is worth it because they've found so many vulnerabilities in their code that they wouldn't have found otherwise, or at least it would have taken them a lot longer without this model.
So just to clarify here, so this is a company like CrowdStrike using the model to find vulnerabilities within its own code, which is itself the cybersecurity product that it offers to sell to customers, right?
Yes, and it's not just cybersecurity companies doing this. A lot of companies like Microsoft, and others that have widely used software are using the Mythos model to scan essentially all of their source code and just find vulnerabilities and quickly patch them. And the idea is that they want to do that before a model like this falls into the hands of hackers who could start doing the same thing and exploiting vulnerabilities before they're patched.
And on the budget side of all this, so they're finding it's more expensive than they may have thought. Are executives telling you that they are planning to expand their budget to make room for models like Mythos, or where do they stand there?
Yeah, I mean, I also spoke to Zscaler, which is another company that is testing this, and they told me that while it is essentially a step change more expensive than their previous code scanning tools, they are just budgeting for it in the year ahead. And in some cases, that might have looked like a difficult conversation with the CFO, saying, "Look, this bill looks crazy, but trust me, it's going to be worth it." And from what I've heard, I think CFOs, CEOs, and even boards are starting to understand the gravity of this, especially with just the amount of, I think, fear that's surrounding, Mythos and comparable models. So from what I've heard, companies are willing to put up that cost, but at the same time, they're trying to be very judicious about how they use these expensive models to make sure they're not spending more than they need to.
Right. So okay, so the cybersecurity companies are saying, "Hey, we're going to make room in our budget for this." What does this mean then for spending from cybersecurity customers? I'm thinking about CrowdStrike and Zscaler's customers. I mean, the costs are going to have to get passed on, right? So, are prices going to go up, or are we going to see enterprises spending a whole lot more on security? What's our best guess there?
Yeah, I spoke to, customers as well, chief information security officers, and essentially what they are saying is they also expect to spend more. Whether that's actually using Mythos or software powered by Mythos, or in some cases, companies have started to just use the models that are already available, like Anthropic's Claude Opus models, which are also not as good as Mythos, but pretty good at finding these vulnerabilities. And they say that they're budgeting more, sometimes in the millions of dollars per year, just to run those types of models to constantly scan their software and find potential vulnerabilities. So what I'm hearing across the board is that companies see this potential wave of AI threats coming, and they're willing to spend ahead of it to make sure that they're not the victim of an embarrassing hack.
Is Mythos gonna be available at all to a wider slate of customers now? Initially, when it came out, they said, "We're only giving it to, like, the top banks and, cybersecurity companies." Is it looking like it's gonna be, wider or have a wider release at all?
Yeah, so Anthropic has said that in the coming weeks, they're going to start releasing models that are comparable to Mythos more broadly. But it's not clear if those models would actually be capable of, doing the type of cyber offensive work that Mythos does, because Anthropic also is going to put in guardrails that essentially will, make the model say, "I'm not going to hack into your system." There are ways for them to do that that would potentially, theoretically say we're only going to hack into your system in a safe environment where you're doing it to your own systems, but that can be a little bit complicated. And Anthropic has been a little bit tight-lipped about what exactly that rollout will look like. So it's not exactly clear how much of these capabilities are going to become broadly available anytime soon.
Got it. Okay, I wanna go back to Microsoft for just a second. This week is the Build conference. You're gonna be there on the ground in San Francisco. What are the big questions that you're planning to ask all the attendees and executives on site?
Yeah, so Microsoft with this build conference, one theme that I have been told by sources that's going to come up is Microsoft trying to essentially pitch its own homegrown AI models as appealing to developers. And specifically, they're releasing their own in-house coding models as well as models for reasoning, and things like transcription and image generation. And my question for developers is just what would it take for you to start using Microsoft's models more broadly? Is it about cost? Is it about performance? Is it just having, different options besides the Anthropic and OpenAI sort of duopoly on models? I'm going to try to get a sense of, how appealing that pitch that Microsoft is making is with developer customers.
Well, and also I was gonna say, piggybacking off our reporting, I think it was last week, I am curious to see how customers might be thinking about the chips that Microsoft, could be looking to unveil. I mean, we hadn't thought that Microsoft was gonna be a serious competitor in the chip category, but based on our reporting, I mean, they are going for maybe more, cheaper, specialized chips that could at least, make a dent in things. So it's certainly an interesting time to be there. Aaron, I want to thank you for coming on. That is Aaron Holmes, our Microsoft reporter here at The Information. Forward deployed engineers have become all the rage as of late, and my colleagues Laura Bratton and Kevin McLaughlin went deep on how the new role is starting to shape Silicon Valley in this weekend's Sunday Insights column. I want to bring on Laura to talk about what she found. Laura, welcome back to the show. It's great to have you here.
Hey, gosh.
Okay, forward deployed engineers. Just remind us, is it just a fancy term for consultants? Well, what exactly is the job description nowadays?
Historically, consultants and software engineers would work together but do separate roles. And the role of a forward deployed engineer is to do both. They are both a consultant who will sit with the customer and figure out what their need for AI is, which models they should use, what kind of applications they might need, which is, traditionally the role of a consultant. And then they'll actually help build that product or implement that product.
Okay, so what made you want to write specifically about it this weekend? Because we've been talking about this for I mean quite a while now. Did something change with the landscape?
Yeah, I think it's really just that more companies are talking about the fact that they're hiring for deployed engineers in their earnings calls. Workday mentioned it in their latest earnings call, and they started hiring for deployed engineers this year and have about 25 on staff now. And then in bigger news, Meta and Google have said that they're gonna bring on forward deployed engineers, and those are obviously the bigger names that we cover. So I would say it's really just that the biggest of big tech is now copying what was once just Palantir's model of having forward deployed engineers. And it's really a big part of their push to scale up enterprise adoption of AI.
Well, one of the most interesting parts of your column, though, is I mean, this is like the role that people want to get at these companies. I mean, it seems like it's highly competitive. It seems like getting people are getting paid top dollar. Second to maybe being a top AI researcher. I mean, the salary bands that you talked about in your story are pretty impressive in some cases. So, what this role has become like the most popular thing since wanting to be a product manager at Meta or something like that?
Yeah, I think it's still early days, so it's hard to say because there were so few forward deployed engineers just a couple of years ago, and the role is growing really rapidly. So LinkedIn told me that their data shows 4,000 forward deployed engineers have been added in the US job market as role postings so far this year. That includes from companies like Cursor, OpenAI, Anthropic, Notion, SoftBank. Companies are hiring these roles, and that's much higher than about 3.5 times the amount of new job listings for forward deployed engineers we saw last year. So I think it's definitely more popular, and more companies are taking on this role. And I think that you know it's also higher paid than a typical software engineering role, about 10 to 15% higher in terms of base salary.
I get the sense that maybe the definition of a forward deployed engineer could vary across different companies. Does that align with what you're seeing?
Some consultants I spoke to said that the role is technically the same. You really just need a deep technical understanding of AI. But obviously, the role is going to look different if you work at Palantir versus if you work at Salesforce or ServiceNow or one of these more traditional SaaS companies. And the argument can be made that if you work as a forward deployed engineer for a model provider like Anthropic or OpenAI, you might have a better technical understanding of their models because you really have a front row seat to see how they're developing.
Right. I want to pivot to a profile that you wrote with our OpenAI and Anthropic reporter Sri Mupidi over the weekend. You both profiled Denise Dresser, who is the chief revenue officer at OpenAI. It was our weekend big read, and you both went deep on who it is, well, what background she's coming into the role with, what it is OpenAI is relying on her for. Why did you decide to focus on Denise at this moment for OpenAI's business?
Well, I think we're really at a point where Anthropic's AI tools have taken off with enterprise customers, and enterprises, like the rise of forward deployed engineer speaks to, enterprises are really beginning to adopt AI in a much more serious way than we saw at the same time last year. And what that means is that the model providers are starting to want to capture a larger share of their software budgets as enterprises shift towards using these AI tools. And Anthropic's really been successful at doing that. About 80% of their revenue comes from business customers, and OpenAI wants to be that too. They want to change from being the super popular consumer focused tech company to a company for enterprise customers. So Denise was brought on to help them with that strategy. She has, 14 years of experience at Salesforce. She's pretty much the perfect person for this job because you really want somebody who's been focused on selling SaaS to enterprises
She
for
was
their.
she was the CEO of Slack, right? I mean
She's
that's
also the CEO of Slack. Yes,
right.
she spent, more than a decade at Salesforce, basically managing a lot of the relationships with larger profile tech companies. She was credited by a lot of folks I spoke to for example, helping build the relationship with AWS. And managing those relationships. And then towards the last couple of years of her tenure, she transitioned after Salesforce acquired Slack to be the CEO of Slack, and was really credited with helping successfully integrate Slack into Salesforce because there was sort of a culture clash among those two
Right.
companies required.
So tell us what did you learn about her time at Salesforce and at Slack that you think could inform the way that she might approach this role at OpenAI? You just talked about the relationships that she had with customers, big cloud providers like AWS, et cetera. OpenAI is in this moment where, like you said, It's funny because based on our reporting, actually, the enterprise business. in aggregate, and we have to look at the latest numbers for this, but at one point it was still larger than Anthropic's enterprise business just based on the enterprise subscriptions. But we obviously know that Codex, the coding model, is where they're trying to make a lot of inroads, getting companies to buy that suite of products. So, I mean, I just wonder, do we know anything about Denise's leadership style, how she approached the role, how she might structure the company to compete in enterprises at OpenAI?
Yeah, I mean, I can Shri knows more about the OpenAI side of things, and my real background for this story was diving into her history at Salesforce and how it set her up for her time at OpenAI. And what I would say, two things. Her colleagues told me over and over that she is super focused on customers and very tough but fair with her colleagues. And so I think one really stark example was that, it was the end of the fiscal year and she was about to close a deal. It didn't, for some reason, close by midnight, and she was no longer eligible for commission on the deal, but she still kept her colleagues there until like 3 or 4 in the morning to close the deal. She also is the type of person to call a team into a meeting on a weekend or at 10 p.m. or text her colleagues at 5 in the morning if a customer is unhappy. So she's really, really focused on customers in a way that I think is ideal for a company like OpenAI, where historically you have more AI researchers that are just focused on building bigger and better models. Now you have a leader who's focused on customers and how successfully they're able to implement OpenAI's products. One last thing that I want to mention is I thought this was a really great example as well. She pitched Slackbot, which has now become central to Salesforce's strategy, at least a year before it launched. And other Salesforce executives, I'm told, were prioritizing Agentforce, which kind of struggled when it was initially launched. And I think that that was a really big tell of Denise's forward-looking abilities and how she not only can manage relationships with customers, but also really see into the future about like what products might be successful for customers.
Great. Well, Laura, I want to thank you for coming on, and I encourage everyone to check out that profile. It is on our website. It is our weekend big read. That is Laura Bratton, our AI reporter and author of our Applied AI newsletter here on TI TV. Meta's former chief technology officer, Mike Schroepfer, is now the founder of Gigascale Capital, a new fund focused on the intersection of energy, materials, and sustainability. The fund raised $250 million, and I want to bring on Mike to talk more about his playbook for his fund. Mike, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So you founded Gigascale Capital, I think it was a little over 2 years ago now. You've got $250 million in new funding. Tell us about what your vision for the fund originally was and how this capital is going to help you get there.
Yeah, when we started 3 years ago, our thesis was quite out of the norm, which was that the physical world, how we build our economy, was the most interesting place to build venture scale companies, and that was not the common wisdom. I would say that the fun thing about where we are now is it's working. I don't have to convince anyone. All of our companies are in a place where the question isn't do people want what they're building? It's how fast can they get it there? We're talking clean power for data centers. We're talking clean materials for anything you want to build. We're talking, compute in faster, better, cheaper for inference and for training. This is just like a tremendous amount of demand has been pulled forward to build all of these things that are kind of better, faster, cheaper than the way we've been doing it for the last 100 years.
So, of all these segments and of all these really specific technology, because energy is so big, I mean, sustainability is huge, and there are problems um, all across the category that need to be solved. I mean, tell us what is like the one innovation that just the last 7 days alone that you have just been so obsessed with that you could see yourself really making a ton of investments in this one specific category.
Well, I'll give you a specific company and a specific product because I think that's even better. There's a company called Heron Power, and they've taken this literally 100-year-old technology, the transformer, and I'm talking about a power electric transformer, not the transformer in an AI model. We have to be specific, but it is literally the piece of equipment that is bottlenecking data center AI build out right now. It's 4 to 5 year back order. It relies on this very special kind of bespoke steel you've got to make, all the rest of it. And Heron Power, Drew Baglino said, hey, We've been for the last 10 years developing a new technology for this, power electronics. It's in every electric vehicle that's shipped. So we've done this at scale. Let's like take that technology in the EV and put it on the grid. I can build a box that's a third the size. It's software programmable. So instead of deciding when I build my piece of hardware exactly what the specs have to be, I drop it on a pad and I can use it for a data center. I can use it for a solar farm. I can use it for an EV car charger. It works in any of these conditions. So it's sort of a single Lego block that works for everything. And so this is a company that, will be shipping commercial products next year. They were founded last year. And they, another one of these, they have more demand than they know how to deal with. And so it's
Right.
an example of new technology solving an old problem.
What would you say is a contrarian belief of yours that is informing the way you plan to invest at Gigascale Capital? And I ask this because again, energy, it is an obvious problem. Everyone knows it needs to be solved. Any money going into the space is good. But what is the contrarian view that you hold?
Well, I think one is I bet you we'll have more compute in the ocean than we do in space by 2030.
Say more. Why?
Oh, we have this massive 10 terawatt untapped resource of wave power. It is cheaper to build a ship than it is to launch a satellite. So on first principles, we should be doing a lot more compute, in the open ocean than we should be in space.
And you have investments in the ocean?
Yeah, there's a company called Panthalassa. Again, early bet. We made it many years ago.
Yeah.
Contrarian bet, but now Peter Thiel has just come in and gave them a bunch of money. So they now have the sort of resources to go ahead and build this. They've had units, in the ocean off the coast of Oregon working, and now they're going towards full scale deployment and development. So they're going to be running compute payloads hopefully next year, year after.
So it sounds like you're not that bullish then on data centers in space.
I think Elon Musk is going to do a great job of it. I think it's a trap for everyone else. I mean, he's got wholesale costs for satellite costs and for launch costs. It's going to be really hard to beat that. So I'm sure, I mean, and Starlink, V3 is probably 20 kilowatts. So he's sort of already there. And so I wouldn't bet against Elon Musk doing it for him. I think everyone else chasing that dream is in for a rough ride.
But I mean, you don't think that SpaceX could, open up the market for other players to? I mean, I know this is a very vertically integrated company here, but it sounds like you don't think that SpaceX is going to open up the market for space data centers more broadly, other than just them launching their own.
That has Starlink opened up the market for satellite internet?
No, not to my recollection.
Great business, awesome product. I only fly, airlines, United, thank you, that have Starlink. Elon is crushing it in this regard. Like, again, I think he'll do a great job building space-based data centers. I think there are many other things that I'm investing in that are exciting in the ocean, on land, fission fusion. We have a lot of places to build next generation solar, batteries. We can build the grid much faster. So
Yeah.
I'm sort of bullish on terrestrial solutions for this, and I think Elon will do a great job in space.
How do you think about all the energy innovations in China? I mean, they have done a lot of work in that area. Are you making any investments in companies over there?
We are not investing in China. We're wholly in the US and Europe and so the rest of the world.
I mean, how do you think about the energy race insofar as all the innovations that China has made in energy and how that could help them in in the AI race altogether?
Well, I think there are lots of lessons from China. They've been incredible on the scale up economics. When you look at sort of battery and solar, it's a lesson in Wright's law, which is every time I double production of something, I reduce the cost somewhere between 10 to 20%, depending on the particular thing. And I think, people sort of scoff at that, but I think it's a source of innovation on its own. And what we're seeing is US based companies bring that innovation back to the US and figure out how to not be designed in California, manufactured in China, but designed in California, manufactured in the United States. And I think that's really exciting. And I'll give you a different example of this, which is, I think we've been scaling a lot of traditional technologies. And I think we're in a place where new technologies can just give you a better solution that's cheaper and cleaner. We've got a company that's making and recycling neodymium magnets in Alameda, California. This is a process that if you were trying to permit the old way of doing it, you couldn't because it's so terribly polluting and bad for workers. But because it's so clean, it's actually cost competitive with Chinese neodymium. So you can go to Alameda, buy it. It's cheaper. That's what the customers care about. But it's also clean. You can walk around the factory and it's totally safe. That sort of co-alignment of cheap and clean and simple is, I think, a revolution that's happening in plain sight.
Hmm. I want to ask you. So, I mean, look, you were the CTO of Meta for a long, long time. Do you still have a role with the company?
I'm still an advisor to the company.
Okay, still an advisor to the company. So, I mean, I just want to ask you then broadly about Meta's place in the AI race right now. I mean, look, we've talked about it a lot on the show. The AI race right now, it seems like everyone's talking about the big three: Anthropic, OpenAI, and Google. Meta is trying to sort of make itself, in that conversation. How do you get there though? It feels like they're not quite there yet. They've done a lot of investing. You've done a lot of investing. I mean, how do we get to crack that big three?
I mean, I'd say that the AI race is quite dynamic. If you go back and look, 6, 12, 18 months ago, who was in the lead, OpenAI and Anthropic, there was a very different common sense consensus on it than now. It felt like OpenAI was a unequivocal lead and Anthropic wasn't there. And now it feels Anthropic is untouchable. So I think we have a very short-term memory on terms of how fast these technologies flip. And I would never bet against Mark. So I think Mark Zuckerberg is working 24/7, is a determined founder, and it's really hard to beat founder-backed companies. If you look at Jensen and Nvidia, if you look at Elon, you got Mark. So I wouldn't bet against them.
And what about the latest slate of models? I mean, what can you tell us about you know what's happening on the ground there with model development and the progress that they're making?
Unfortunately, I'm not can't talk about Meta specifically or anything going on in there, but again, I think that I wouldn't spend my time with them if I wasn't bullish about where they're going.
Right. Maybe I would love for you to just help us understand a little bit of just the enterprise push for Meta in AI. I mean, just help us understand what you think that could look like, because I know we've done a lot of reporting as to, Meta is now looking to implement its own forward deployed engineers, and I'm trying to understand what an enterprise product from Meta in AI would look like. And I'm thinking about the advertising business. I'm thinking about the WhatsApp storefronts. Like, illustrate it for us a little bit.
Yeah, again, I'm not unfortunately can't talk about sort of their plans for that right now, but excited to see what they build.
Okay. Last question for you then. Back to the energy front, Gigascale Capital. You were talking about space data centers. The SpaceX IPO is coming up. You said you're not betting against Elon. Are you? What do you think of the valuation for SpaceX coming into the IPO?
We'll see. I mean, I think it's if you've read the S1, it's exciting. It's an interesting business. I think Elon is vertically integrating a lot of interesting things from chips to space. So I think from SpaceX is the example of the company that I use that is furthest ahead of any of its competitors. I mean, they land rockets on a weekly basis. The chart of launches is SpaceX and then like China and then like rest of everything else. It's just absolutely bonkers how far ahead they are, of everyone else in the race. And so how do you value that in the market? I'll let the market figure out.
And so, are you buying shares? Are you a SpaceX shareholder?
No, I'm not going to talk about my public shareholdings now, but again, I think you could see where I stand on him and the company.
Great. Well, Mike, I want to thank you for coming on. I personally very excited about the ocean data center segment. I think that's one that we don't talk about, and so I'm going to encourage you to bring a couple of your portfolio founders on the show to talk more about that. Because I think terrestrial data centers is certainly an opportunity that we need to figure out first. That
Yeah,
is Mike Schroepfer, the founding partner of Gigascale Capital, here on TI TV.
thank you.
Well, that does it for today's show. A reminder, we are on this stream Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. If you can't make it then, episodes are available on theinformation.com, on our YouTube channel, or wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to follow us on social media, on X, on Instagram, on TikTok. I'm already excited for our next show tomorrow. Have a great rest of your Monday. Bye-bye for now.